Hello, and welcome to the KaBRICK add-on tutorial, where I'm going to be showing you how to use KaBRICK to make cool LEGO explosions for animations. So first things first, I've imported an object that we're going to be using to demonstrate all the fun features of KaBRICK. So you're going to import some kind of object, have the KaBRICK add-on installed. It should be very basic. Now, let's take a look at the KaBRICK panel first. We have the active collection, which is the collection that you want to explode. Make sure that the collection only has LEGO objects, no empties, nothing like that will cause problems. Passive collection is the collection that will get turned into passive rigid bodies, so that just means that they'll collide with the active rigid bodies, but won't actually be an active rigid body itself. You want the car to be an active rigid body because it's the one doing the exploding, and the street to be a passive collection because you want the car objects to interact with the street and not just clip right through it. Use constraints is just something that will help make the LEGO pieces stick together more. You set it to breakable. They'll be more likely to fall apart. If it's unbreakable, they will still fall apart because Blender's physics system is a little buggy, but it'll make them pieces clump into larger pieces. Into larger pieces, but may be glitchier, as I said, because Blender's a little bit janky, but it's fine. Create rigid bodies creates a simulation using all the settings you selected. Remove rigid bodies removes the rigid bodies from the entire world, which is fun in case you ever need to restart. You mess something up and need to restart everything, just get rid of all the rigid bodies and start again. Now, this button may be a little buggy. I've heard mixed results from people. Sometimes it crashes Blender, sometimes it doesn't. I don't know why it crashes Blender, it doesn't give an error. But I'll be working on that in the not so distant future. Now, let's actually demonstrate how this is going to work. So, because there's no other objects in the scene we want it to collide with, it will just be the active collection. I'm going to use constraints, set them to breakable, leave it at 300. And then create the rigid body. Now this process does take a little bit sometimes, and I'm going to leave in the full length of time it takes to generate this right now, just for the sake of anyone who's considering buying KaBRICK and wants to know just how long it takes. Part of the process might involve Blender looking like it crashed. It didn't crash, it's just loading, as you can see it just finished. Also, the amount of pieces you have will definitely play a huge role in how long it takes to generate. And additionally, using constraints increases the generation time by roughly double. So those are all things to keep in mind. Also, it is very hardware dependent. The better your computer, the faster KaBRICK's going to generate. But once it's done that, we can now see that it should explode like so. Of course, it's going to be a little slow at first because it's doing all the math and stuff, but if we play it back, there we go. Nice little default explosion. So this panel is where we're going to be doing most of the stuff in KaBRICK, most of the basic explosions, and all that fun stuff. Now after that is the control panel, which is my personal favorite, but we're actually going to do that next because just to make things easier, I'm going to show you how the animation panel works. So the collection is the collection that you want to be animated. Frame start is the frame you want the animation to start, or rather the frame that you want your rigid bodies to come into effect and explode. So right now it's set to 1, that's the default. Let's set this to like 10, and if we do this, you'll see that every piece now has a keyframe there, and will now blow up on frame 10. Might be a little slow, once again. And what's cool about this is that you can use this, to go up here, to create layered explosions by creating different collections. Let's name this Anim 1, this one can be Anim 2, and then the rest of this will be Anim 3. The naming does not matter at all, that's my personal preferred naming scheme, just to avoid confusion. So what we can do now with these collections, let's move these last few pieces into Anim 3 so they don't get left out. We have these 3 collections. What we can do is we choose Anim 1, let's have it start at 10 still, so yeah, nothing changes there. Anim 2, start at 15, Anim 3, have this start at frame, let's say frame 25 just for fun. Now all those have different set keyframes depending on which collection they're part of. And when we play back this explosion, you'll see, very slowly at first, but everything explodes at different times. You can use this to get some really cool effects the more detailed you get with it. And it's super useful because otherwise you have to do this all by hand. Choose a single piece, animate one of these, copy that to all the rest of the collection, and it's kind of a pain. I basically made this add-on because I got tired of doing it all by hand. And now, hopefully, it'll help other people too. So that's the animation collection. Pretty powerful. I'm going to quickly move all this back to Airbus A30. Delete these. And now what we can do is the control object collection, which is definitely my favorite feature of KaBRICK. It's super neat. And as you'll see in a second, create an object, any kind of mesh, has to be a mesh, no empties allowed, that causes problems. Let's go to viewport display is bounds just so we can see what's going on here. Move right over here, set a keyframe, start a frame 110, set another keyframe, move it past where you think the thing will be. Okay, AT, convert this to linear, so it should just, oh, it's gonna explode again, of course. Well, yeah, so it slowly moves across the whole plane. And what we can do with this is, first of all, make sure that the cube, your mesh object, is not in the collection that you're going to use for the animation. So we have cube right there, it worked perfectly. Animation collections, the collection that's going to be animated, obviously. And then the frame range is the frame that it will detect if each piece is colliding with the object. And if it is colliding, it'll set it to an active rigid body and it'll explode. So you can get some really cool delayed explosions, like procedural explosions, without having to manually hand keyframe everything. So since ours goes from frame 1 to frame 110, we'll set that as our frame start and stop range, and then we'll calculate the activator. Shouldn't take too long. We'll go through everything and properly stack up the keyframes so that each piece only explodes as the object moves across it. Alright, it's done. That was real time, no cuts, because I was too lazy. Oh, I forgot about the wings. Okay, so as you'll see in a second, it will be a little bit slow, but as we start to play this back, you'll see that each piece only explodes when it comes into contact with the empty object, or the active object rather, which can create some really cool effects. This is a super basic example, but the possibilities are pretty much endless and super fun. And as you can see, pieces that didn't collide with a thing, such as these pieces up here, will never activate because they never interact with the object. Same with the wings here. And you can do this multiple times, you just have to use different collections, different activator objects if you want to. It doesn't have to be a cube, it can be any shape, anything you desire. And to improve performance, it's best to set the keyframes for the start and stop range as close to the actual values as possible. Because if we set this to like 500, even though it's only going to be colliding the first 100 frames, that would really just tank performance and make it take a lot longer than necessary, which no one wants. No one likes wasting time. So that is the control object panel. Alright, now I'm going to show you how to use the simulation panel, which is the last panel here in KaBRICK. And this one just makes life a little easier when trying to deal with baking simulations. So as you can see, you can set the sim start, sim end frame, and this is independent of any keyframes on the object itself. So if you have a keyframe to explode at frame 10, but the simulation doesn't start till frame 15, it won't explode until frame 15, because that's when the whole rigid body world as a whole comes into effect. But for our purposes right now, set this to 50, nice and small. Sim speed is really important. If you want it to be more realistic, go for higher values, 5 to 7, depending on what exactly you want, can be good. Say 7 for now. Let's make it 6 actually. No ground. Whenever you change any of these settings, you have to hit the update simulation button for them to come into effect. So frame 50. And I'm quickly gonna create a collision object just so that we can see this a little better. That'd be a little less boring, hopefully. Just gonna move this to a new collection. Naming doesn't matter whatsoever, but as you can see, there doesn't have to be an active and a passive at all times. You can just be passive. And if we create this, it should just, makes this a passive object really nice and quick. So now what we can do is go back to the simulation panel. Starts 1, set this to 100, just for funsies. Update simulation, and then we can bake the simulation. Now this might take some time. Unfortunately, there's not a way to have it display the bake progress that I have found. Blender does it natively through some wacky methods that I've not been able to reproduce, so you just kind of have to wait, and it may look like it's crashing. It's not, it's just thinking really hard. So I'll probably cut till it finishes baking, but that's the entire baking process. As you can see, the bake is finished baking, and if we play it back, it should be buttery smooth. Oh yeah, there we go. So because you have constraints, it's a little glitchy at higher speeds, which is something to keep in mind. But as you can see, it falls apart, interacts with the collision collection properly, except for that guy. Ignore him, he doesn't count. Yeah, it's generally better to have some thickness to your collision objects just for the sake of making Blender's life easier, because there we go. It can be a little bit more complicated when it's just like a single pixel thin plane rather than like a cube or something. So that is basically how to use the KaBRICK add-on to make some cool explosions for your LEGO animations. I'm going to keep working on this add-on, keep trying to improve it, make it better, faster, add new features if I think of any that'd be helpful. If you have any suggestions for KaBRICK or comments, anything, just leave them in the comments. I'd love to read that, hear any feedback you guys have. But that's about it for today. You should now know how to use KaBRICK for your LEGO animations. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. I've enjoyed making it. Hang on out.